All right, we're at the top of the hour, so I'm going to go ahead and get started here. I am Joshua Demetri. I'm a solutions architect from Valiantys, and I'm here to talk to you about Atlassian Rovo and kind of give you some background on what the product is, but also how it fits into our cloud ecosystem of products and how we use it at Valiantys to be the connector between a lot of the different parts of enterprise cloud adoption. So let me go ahead and get started here with a bit of introduction to who we are at Valiantys, and we are a Platinum Solutions partner. We have a truly global presence, and you'll see that we have offerings across the spectrum of all types of things within Atlassian products, from cloud migrations to tools implementations to custom software development, and we have like a whole selection of different services, and we kind of try to be the one-stop shop for everything Atlassian. So you'll see a bunch of our accreditations here, along with this screen here showing a couple different things that we are able to do and kind of different areas that we can help with support. We have training and support available, which is similar to like the webinar that you're attending currently. We have this cloud health check service as well. We can kind of see how your cloud implementation is doing, help you migrate to cloud if you aren't already migrated to cloud. And obviously Rovo implementation is on here as well. So helping organizations understand where Rovo fits into their cloud ecosystem and how to use that across the board for their products. So that's a little bit about us. Obviously, a quick introduction there. What I want to do is go ahead and jump into our topics and kind of get to the meat of the content here, right? So I want to start from this diagram here that I'm calling the connected enterprise with Atlassian. I want to start here, even though it doesn't have the Rovo part of the screen showing yet, because I want to give the context for what cloud architecture looks like with Atlassian products that we are putting Rovo into. Where is the starting point? Kind of where is Rovo fitting into in what we already have as our cloud architecture? Now, this is a diagram that I use quite a bit to demonstrate what it looks like to implement Atlassian cloud products kind of as a full solution for an enterprise and really for any business. And the main parts of this diagram, as you'll see, is on the left, I have this blue box with all of the Atlassian products that I'm outlining here. So Jira, Confluence, Jira Align, so on and so forth. And then on the right, you'll see that I have the red and green boxes for kind of some custom tooling and external applications. So in this red box, this is things like custom applications that you've built in-house. This is any dashboarding that you have, so like Tableau reports or Power BI or whatever it might be that you might currently have in your business. We basically are recognizing here that any organization, especially at scale, is going to have more than just Atlassian products. You're going to have a full suite of products that exist and tools that exist inside of your organization. And we want to find ways to connect all of those tools together to create a single architecture and a single source of truth, along with a single place to interact with that data. This green box is demonstrating what it might look like with, let's say, figure out what's going on with this presentation here. That green box is going to be demonstrating things like other SaaS products. So when we're talking about things like, let's say you have your Atlassian products like Jira, Confluence, but you also have other SaaS products outside of your Atlassian products. That is where this green box, sorry about this presentation, is going to be representing those different pieces, right? So those external data sources are there to demonstrate bringing in data from other systems into the Atlassian suite of products so that we have that single source of truth, that single place to look at this data from. All right, so this is kind of our main structure. What I want to call out is the piece I haven't really talked about yet, which is this piece in the middle here called Forge. So obviously there are a lot of lines here kind of drawing together connection points between different parts of our cloud architecture. So what is this piece in the middle that seems to be connecting everything together? And why are we talking about that in context with a Rovo webinar? So Forge is the developer platform for Atlassian Cloud. It is what you're going to use if you're building, custom tooling or customizations essentially beyond the out-of-the-box tooling that exists in Atlassian Cloud. So when we look at, let's say Jira, and we want to extend the feature set of Jira to add in functionality that it's more specific to the needs of our business, right? It goes beyond the out-of-the-box tooling because as an organization and as we grow, our processes grow, and we already have some pretty mature processes in organization, most likely, that are not necessarily always served by just the out-of-the-box tools. Atlassian does a great job of building the foundation, building the framework and the tool set for us to build off of. And then what we can do is use Forge, which is their developer platform, to build the customizations and extensions of that product set for us to be able to benefit from getting a bit more specific and a bit more refined in the way that we interact with the application based on our needs as an organization. So I'm not going to go all the way, deep into Forge, right? There's a lot to talk about there. And we do have other Forge offerings like Forge training and Forge webinars that you might see pop up as well. I wanted to introduce it though, just so we understand that Forge is that developer platform. And it is the piece here that is allowing us to connect all of these external tools, all of the custom dashboards, the custom applications that we might have built in-house. Maybe you have some developer teams internally already, and they could be using Forge to connect all of the things you already have in your business, external tooling, into the platform. And what this creates is it allows us to use Atlassian Cloud and the Atlassian Cloud ecosystem as our source of truth for the way that we work in our organization. And it allows us to access that from analytics as well. So we're going to get analytics across the board that includes data from all of these different sources. Now, I've kind of talked through all of this, and why are we talking about this for a Rovo webinar, right? So in the next slide, I'm going to show how does Rovo fit into the equation. And I want to kind of look at that a little bit, because Rovo is also going to serve as another way, along with Forge, to connect our enterprise together. It's to connect everything from the business into a single source of truth and give us ways to operate on that information, get insights from that data from a single place. So as you'll see, this diagram has a lot of similarities. Everything on the right is the same. So we have our custom applications, custom reporting, dashboards, external products like other SaaS tools, other things that we might have going on in the business that we want to pull into our data set. And then we also have on the left the same, Atlassian products. What I've done here is broken Forge out into its own box, and I've broken Rovo out into its own box as well, where now we can see kind of where this is going to fit into our architecture. So Rovo here is going to serve as another way to connect our business together. We obviously know that AI is kind of a big buzzword in the industry right now, and everyone's looking for ways to implement AI into their process to build, the next suite of AI tools, AI transformation, kind of all these ideas of implementing AI in a way that benefits our teams and kind of offload some of the workload so we don't have to, do the mundane tasks ourselves. We can use AI to do that. Rovo is going to help us do that. And really what it's going to serve to do is that Rovo is going to allow us to get that benefit for all of the data across our organization. So the same way that we were doing with just Forge in the previous slide, we have all of these external data sources connected into our Atlassian Cloud product suite through Forge and now through Rovo. And Rovo is going to allow us to take all of that data, all of those connections, and get AI insights and AI actions and kind of all this AI power on top of the data across the whole organization. So we're creating this single source of truth that also has AI tooling built into it out of the box using Rovo. So what I want to point out here as well is that Rovo has 3 boxes inside of it. There are 3 main components to Rovo: search, chat, and agents. I'm going to spend some time on each of those here in a second, kind of break out each of those and talk to you about what they are. But what do they actually mean in the context of this diagram? What does each one of those serve as its purpose? Search is going to be our way to find data quickly, and I'll dig into that a little bit more here in a second. That's going to be a way for us to easily find information across the organization, including from external connections. Chat is going to be our way to get insights off of that data quickly. So we're going to be able to ask questions essentially to a chat bot that will be able to respond with contextual and information based off of that question we're asking and the data that we have in our instance. And then agents is where we're going to tie into Forge, and we're going to tie into kind of some actions and being able to take action on behalf of a user. Agents are going to allow us to take Rovo to the next level, where not only can we just ask it questions, but it can actually take action on our behalf, and we can create very refined and custom tooled ways to interact with AI that are based on our processes. That's going to be where we're going to show some examples here as well. We're probably going to spend a good chunk of time talking about agents because of the fact that there's so much to talk about there and a lot of power to be gained from using agents in the instance. So, with that said, let's just go ahead and jump into talking about each of those 3 sections a little bit more in depth. I'm going to start with search. So search, like I said, is this way for us to find information quickly. It's a unified search across the entire enterprise. Essentially, you'll hear this referred to as enterprise search. You'll hear this referred to as unified search or just Rovo search. And Rovo search allows us to just look for something across the organization, whether that's in Jira, JSM, Confluence, or external connections. So the cool thing about search and chat as well is that you can actually create these external connections to other tools like Google Drive, like Slack, and other SaaS products or other tools that might exist. And you can connect to that data. And through that connection, when I actually search in Rovo Search, I'm going to get results from that external platform along with my Atlassian tools. So it really is a unified search where I can go and search for something in my organization and get answers or results that are from not just my Atlassian tools, but also from external tools as well. You'll also be able to kind of gather some insights as you're searching. So chat is kind of built into this process as well. We'll see that in a second where we can go straight from search into chat, and I'll show some examples of that as well. And then, we have those external connections, and that's going to allow us to really get that power, right? So we've got the ability to search across the organization and across not just Atlassian tools, but all the tools that are out there. There is also a Chrome extension available as well. So you can take some time and kind of look through the Atlassian docs, but that's pretty cool. Basically, it implements Rovo Search across whatever you're looking at on your browser. It overlays on whatever app you're looking at and allows you to search for information in your knowledge base that relates to the actual information you're looking at on your screen in the browser. So some pretty cool things coming out in terms of enterprise search and this Rovo Search functionality. Now, moving on to chat. Chat is going to be our first way to really interact with Rovo in kind of a human-esque way, right? We're going to be asking chat questions, and it's going to respond with contextual responses based on our data in the instance. Now, this is also going to have the ability to use the data from connections. So like in that search example where we had Google Drive and Slack or whatever the other tools we want to connect to it, chat is also going to be able to access those. So when we ask it questions, it can understand the context of all of our tools. And what it allows us to do is essentially take the information that something like Rovo Search can find and ask questions about it and create some inferences based on the data that exists. So the example in this screenshot is just what should I work on next, which is a good example to go to because it demonstrates basically needing to have understanding of what the priorities, what the different business practices need, of what are the things that should be a higher priority than others, and allowing it to make some of those inferences. You can ask chat essentially anything about the instance. So let's say you have an HR space in Confluence and you want for your team to be able to ask it questions about vacation policies. It's able to handle that pretty much out of the box where you can start asking it questions about what those policies are, and it'll respond with an answer based on the context in that Confluence space. So that's chat. We're going to come back to chat as well when we talk about agents, because chat's going to be a crucial part of how we interact with Rovo agents as we talk through those as well. Okay, so Rovo agents is kind of the biggest of the topics just because there's so much more to talk about here. Essentially, this is where, they hear Atlassian describe this as AI as a teammate. This is where we can take actions on behalf of the user, and agents can really be refined and tuned to function as a kind of customized agent that you can chat to, or you can use in automations. Essentially, it becomes a way to create actions on behalf of the user using AI to determine how to understand those complex tasks. So there are going to be a couple of different ways that we can both create and use Rovo agents. I'm going to talk through all of those so we have a good understanding of the full scope of what agents can do currently. And as of right now, there are two primary ways to create an agent, and there are also going to be two ways to interact with it. So in order to create an agent, the first way is just through the UI. I'm going to walk through this in an actual demo here in a second, where I'm going to create an agent or kind of show you how I created an agent, where you can go through just the UI, on your Atlassian Cloud instance. And through the UI, you can create an agent, kind of give it some customizations, give it some actions, and that's going to allow you to, without really needing to be all that technical, create a customized Rovo agent. That's the first way to do it. The second way to create a Rovo agent is through Forge. So I was talking about Forge a little bit earlier in that diagram about how it is the developer platform for cloud. It allows us to connect all the different pieces of our organization together into our Atlassian Cloud suite of products. Well, Forge is going to allow us to create custom agents as well that go beyond what you can do with the UI. So in the UI, when you create an agent, you can do quite a lot, but what you're going to be limited to is kind of the tools that Atlassian has built out of the box for you to have those connections. So you're going to be able to access the data from external connections and the data from inside your Atlassian instance, but you're not necessarily going to be able to have the full power of what you would expect from just software development at large, where you can create any sort of actions and any sort of automation and kind of just write the code for what you want it to do programmatically. That's where Forge comes in. If you create a Forge Rovo agent, you're going to be able to basically do whatever you would want to with that information. And it allows you to connect the Rovo understanding of that context and what Rovo knows about the different areas of that data, connect that to a software development process that you're already probably going to have in your business. If we have a development team already, what we're able to do is basically have that developer team build out the script to run and then just connect that to Rovo. And then Rovo can determine when and how to run that script. It allows us to use the knowledge we already have with software development to further that process. And I'll show an example of that as well here in a second. So those are the two ways to create a Rovo agent, and I'll go more in depth with those when we get into our demos. The two ways to actually use a Rovo agent are either chat or automations, and I have a screenshot for each of those here. So on the right, the screenshot is interacting with an agent in chat. And I'm going to show you an example of actually this exact assistant here in a second, where you go and you open up chat and you can ask it questions the same way you do just regular Rovo chat, but it's going to use the kind of refined prompting and the refined data set or instructions or actions that you've given to that agent. So that's the first way to interact with it. It's kind of the most basic, right? Chat and kind of this chat interface kind of sets off the cues in our mind to know that this is almost like ChatGPT kind of interface. Obviously, the difference here that it not being ChatGPT is that it has context of our data, right? So Rovo agents allow us to create almost a ChatGPT-like interface through chat, but it has context of our data and goes far beyond what it can do with just generic knowledge and general understanding. So it allows us to get a bit more power out of our data than just a ChatGPT might be able to do, because it really has that context and understands those complex tasks. The second way to use a Rovo agent as of right now is through automations. And I have to say, automations with Rovo are probably my favorite feature that exists in Rovo right now, because this opens up so many possibilities. The automation engine inside of Atlassian Cloud is already super powerful. And if you have not been using that, you should really look into it and kind of use automations further. What I would argue as well is that automations allow us to do a lot of things in our instance that don't require human interaction, and therefore they serve the purpose that we're really looking for out of AI, right? We want to use AI to reduce the load on kind of our initial support staff, or maybe want to reduce the amount of questions that we're getting about simple HR practices that could be responded to just by giving context from a document in Confluence. Maybe we want to automatically prioritize issues, which is what I'm going to be doing with this screenshot and with the agent that I'll be showing you. There are lots of things we can do with automations, and we can tie into the already powerful automation tools inside of Jira and Confluence, and then use a Rovo agent as part of that, where in the automation, we can take context of the issue or whatever we're operating on in that automation, ask Rovo agents a question, and based on that response, we can then take action on it using that response as a value that we have access to. So those are the two ways to create and the two ways to use Rovo agents as of right now. Like I said, I will be walking through each of those with an actual demo as well. So we'll kind of get a little bit more insight into what that actually looks like, practically speaking. Now, one more thing to talk about before I get into demos is security and trust. This is a really important thing to address, because when we talk about AI and we talk about implementing AI on a larger scale and into our instance, security is always going to be a concern, because we don't want for our data to go off and be training models and be building a knowledge base for other organizations. We want to make sure our data is being handled privately and also being kept secure. So as far as the security for right now in Rovo, we know out of the box is it respects the existing user access controls. So from a user perspective, if I go into Rovo chat and I ask it a question, it will only ever respond with things that it has access to based on my user level access. So it's just out of the box. We don't have to worry about narrowing down access levels for each person or each project. it will automatically only respond with things that are relevant or accessible to that user. The next thing that's really important to note is that inputs and outputs, so basically what you type into the system, what it responds back to you from the system, those things are not being used to train or enhance the other models used by Rovo. It's also important to note here that Rovo does utilize a combination of Atlassian LLMs along with OpenAI's LLMs. So it does send some of the inputs to OpenAI. The way that it handles that process, though, is that each of the inputs and outputs are done independently. So essentially, we aren't sending a whole chat history to OpenAI, having it process and then come back. It's individually, each input and output are being sent, they're isolated, and they are not being stored, and they're not being used to train or enhance any models by both Atlassian or OpenAI. So they're handling that with the pretty high security standards. They've already kind of handled that part of the equation. This is something that if you were going to implement AI internally and you're going to do that, within your organization without wanting to go out to OpenAI or kind of build that part of the process, you probably have to implement quite a bit to handle that security concern internally as well. There are a lot of things to think about there. Atlassian is handling a lot of that for us, and we can kind of offload some of that trust to the cloud platform that we already have. Now, as far as SOC 2 and ISO certification, they don't currently support or have the certification for these, but that should be coming soon. Essentially, where we stand on that right now is that the majority, or if not all, of the actual processes and tools being used by Rovo and Atlassian Intelligence, for that matter, are actually compliant with SOC 2 and ISO, but they have not yet been added to the certification cycle that exists for Atlassian's certification in those standards. So we should see very soon that we get the certification for SOC 2 and ISO, and so those should be coming as well. Now, as far as data residency, that's kind of the biggest concern right now from my perspective in Rovo, is that it's not currently supported. We do know from Atlassian that this is a thing that they are working on and that they're working to create, because it's going to be a blocker for a lot of clients. What I would say on the data residency front is that I would argue that it's still a good time to look at Rovo, even if this is a blocker, to play around with the tooling, to do some testing, do some proof of concepts, create a demo instance where you can play around with Rovo and create some implementations that you can test. Because once data residency does show up, if that is a blocker, we want to be ready to implement that quickly, to be already ready to go with Rovo. AI is going to be the next wave of features that are going to make a huge difference in the organizations that are within this industry. So we want to be ready for that when it's available, and data residency should be coming hopefully soon. And when it does come, we want to be ready for it. So it's still a good time to get in the door with Rovo, even if you are still waiting for that data residency, because we can also, through the process of creating proof of concepts and doing testing and doing training around Rovo and these webinars like this, we can kind of push for development in that area as well to get data residency pushed sooner in the timeline. All right, so with that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into some demos. I want to just go ahead and start from a couple of different things that we can look at in an actual instance. So the first place I want to go is Rovo Chat. And I want to start just from opening up this chat window and showing you that if we go and open this up, we have from this chat button with Rovo, I have kind of a selector of all the different things I can ask questions to. Chat is the most basic of them, and I can come in here and ask it questions about this space. I created this Confluence space just as kind of a demo space. All of the actual information that I put in this space, I generated with Atlassian Intelligence. And so it's not necessarily real data per se, but it's representative of the type of data that we might have in a space that's managing the different offerings of our business. So this is kind of our basic chat. From the chat interface, this is where we can switch over to our custom Rovo agents. So I have this sales assistant here, and the sales assistant is going to serve to, from Confluence, basically give me some context and some guidance on how to position and sell different solutions and offerings that we might have. So what I can do is I can go in here and say, what is a good offering to bring up with a client looking to do a Jira cloud migration. And we can go ahead and see what that responds. I've given the prompt to the sales agent to basically go through and look at the offerings in this space and give me some information based off of that. You'll notice that it's kind of giving me this cloud transformation with Atlassian products. That is this document here, giving me kind of some of the bullet points from that document as well, and giving me the source to that document directly so I could click into it and actually see where that data came from. Now, the cool thing is once I get this data, I don't have to stop here, right? I can keep going from this point and say, what is the best way to position this for a client in the financial industry, let's say. And then from there, it'll take the previous information it had. It'll take the fact that I want it to be in the financial industry, and it'll go from there and give me another response, kind of talking through all the different things that we can build there. I could even go further. Let's say I'm, from the sales team and I want to know what are the specific areas, if I can spell this correctly, where Valiantys can provide unique support. And we can kind of see a response based on that as well. Give it some time to think here. And you'll notice that it basically goes through and lists all of the things that I pointed out in kind of the introduction to Valiantys. I've plugged some of those into this document where we have tools integration, but also some bespoke solutions, custom agent development, knowledge transfer. These are all things that are being pulled from this document, which I generated with AI just to kind of get some demo data in here. So what we can see is that we have a lot of powerful tooling already out of the box, just with this sales assistant that is actually a relatively simple prompt. And so I can go in here as sales staff and get quick ideas and insights on how I want to operate with this, proposal or kind of positioning these different solutions and offerings, and allows me to do that pretty easily. Now let's go ahead and look at another example. And I want to kind of start going through the process of showing you both of the ways to create an agent, along with both of the ways to use an agent and what that looks like. We just saw how to interact with an agent with chat. I'm going to show you another example of that as well inside of Jira this time. So this was our example inside of Confluence. Let's go ahead and pull up this legal assistant now in Jira. So I created this project as a demo for a legal organization that basically they have this big project, this JSM project with requests that come in for many different cases. So it's not just one case, it's all the cases coming in. There are these requests to sign contracts or check things out or can take action, communicate with the client. And it can be challenging over time to find, what are the next steps for the particular case that I'm working on as part of this legal team. And this legal assistant is designed to help with that. So I can go in here and say something like, help me with the Smith case. And what that's going to do is it's going to go through all of the issues in this JSM project, all the requests, and anything that it has to do with the Smith case, it's going to return back to me. So now without having to search through any of these issues, I have been able to very quickly get the two tasks that are next up in the priority list for the Smith case to be worked on. You'll also notice that for prioritization, it has down here that the task related to a contract, which is this one up here, should be prioritized because in order to continue other work, we need that contract signed. So I've given it some information about how to prioritize issues as well, where anything with the contract takes that priority, which is another functionality that I have out of this agent. Now, what I want to do is actually show you how this agent is created. So if I go to this screen here, this is actually the Atlassian Rovo product page. So if I go in my product switcher and select Rovo, that's where I'm going to end up. It's right here. This is where you access Rovo chat or Rovo search as well, rather. So this is where I could, implement Rovo search and kind of add connections and do that from here. But from chat, you'll also see that I'm seeing all of the chats I've made to different agents from both of those examples are showing up here. And I can also kind of go in and browse through my agents. And what I want to do is pull up the legal assistant example and go into edit agent and show you what we actually have from the UI to create an agent. So this is one of the first ways we're going to look at to build a Rovo agent. So we talked about there being the UI and there being forged to build an agent. This is how you do this with the UI. I can go in and the process of creating an agent, I give it a name, an owner, a description, and then the instructions is essentially a prompt. So we've kind of all probably heard the term prompt engineering or kind of the process of refining the prompt and instructions that we give to an agent or to a chatbot, or that we ask questions in a certain way to get the response that we want. That's what we're doing here with the instructions. This is where I'm going to tell it you're an assistant to a legal team. I'm giving it all of the ideas of how it's going to operate. And when I first built this agent, I was able to build it rather quickly, but then I spent probably a couple of weeks just over time as I was testing it out, refining the prompt and kind of getting it to a spot where it responds pretty consistently with the answers that I expect for it to respond with. And that's going to be a big part of the process of what we're doing for creating an agent. But as you can see, the tooling for how to build that with the Atlassian Cloud product with Rovo is pretty simple and pretty approachable. Now, we also will see that we can select some different conversation starters. This is like when you're chatting with the agent, the example chats that you get, you can set what those are for your agent. Then we have knowledge and actions. So knowledge allows us to refine exactly what this agent has access to. So in this case, it only has access to the Legal Team 1 project. I could also give it access to Confluence Spaces. I could also give it access to my external connections. So Google Drive being one here, where I can actually say, go ahead and get access to my data from Google Drive along with my Jira and Confluence data. If I were to uncheck this box here, what it would do is just give it access to everything in the entire instance. So you basically, by default, it has access to everything, assuming that the user has access to that data, of course. And if I select this toggle switch, then I can refine it down to just what it should have access to. Now, actions allow us to have this agent actually take some action on behalf of that user. So I can actually go in here and tell it that it should know how to edit an issue or assign an issue or create an issue. A lot of different things that we can do from here in order to create a more powerful agent that can take action on behalf of the user. And a lot of those things are built in. Once we get to some more complex actions, that's where we're going to go into building an agent with Forge, and I'll show you that here in a second. But this is going to be what we can do from the UI out of the box without having to, leave the Atlassian Cloud interface. All right, so that's my legal assistant, kind of how I created it. You'll notice that I get to this same screen if I go and create a new assistant. So if I create an agent here, I'll actually be originally sent to this create an agent screen with a type of message prompt. So it'll actually help you create an agent using AI. So essentially use AI to create your AI agent. I tend to skip this step because I tend to want to just start from the kind of prompt engineering perspective right away. If you hit the skip to manual step, it just goes straight to that screen that I was showing you before, where you can build out that agent that you want to create. All right, so that is the first way to create an agent. The second way to create a Rovo agent is through Forge. Now, I want to show you an example of that, and I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but I just think it's important to see actually just how approachable it is from the perspective of building that Rovo agent. So what I'm going to do is actually jump into the code a little bit. And like I said, I'm really just wanting to show how approachable this is. So even if you have never looked at code in your life, this is relatively simple to look at, and it's really the same setup as we saw in the instance that we saw before in the UI. So you'll notice that in this file, you can kind of pick out some keywords, right? There's a Rovo agent, name, description, and then prompt. So prompt is my instructions. And this is actually a prompt and an agent that came from an example that Atlassian provides on their documentation. So you can go and find the same one in the docs for Rovo as well. And the prompt is just the same thing that we had in the instructions section of our UI. You can go through and assign your prompt. You can give it all the information it needs, tell it how to operate and refine that over time. We also have our conversation starters, so that's available as well. And where it gets really powerful, and the reason why we have jumped over to Forge and to the code, is when we start to go to actions. So in actions, I've just told it this get issues name, and get issues actually corresponds to some code that I have written that should be, or in this case, that Atlassian has provided, but that you would basically be writing as part of building your agent that you want to use as an action for that agent in particular. And you'll notice down here in this action section, we've got a couple different things to look at. So the main area that I want to look at is that we have this get issues as the name of my action, but the input section is the most important here, where I'm basically defining what are the things that Rovo should be looking for in the context of the questions being asked by the user in order to know how to take action on it. So I'm giving it an input of a label, where that title is label, and the name of that is going to correspond with the description of the label to filter the issues by. So if I were to ask this agent, filter the issues by the legal label, then it would go through here and it would find that the label was that legal keyword, and it would use that as the value called label. That value then is going to be able to be used in the code later on so that our developers can use that value as they would any other value in their application. And now I can use that to take action on it. So essentially, this is the connection point between Rovo and the rest of our software development process, where we are allowing Rovo to find the information for these different pieces of data. We're telling Rovo these are the things that we need in order to know how to take action. And then down here, we're kind of hooking it up to this get issues function and kind of going beyond the scope of what we're going to be talking about now into the actual function itself, where we actually take action. And this is kind of all where the developers are going to live, right? So we can kind of start to see where the separation can be made between you can have a technical, Jira admin build out this part of the process, build out the prompt, build out that part of the process, and then a developer can build the actual code behind that action that's being taken, and we can have those teams work together pretty well. And it allows us to, really have an approachable way to build very customizable agents. And from here, we can see how the software development process we already have in place, the teams that we might already have in place in an organization that are doing software development can be utilized to kind of jumpstart our process into building agents, building customizations, extending the feature set that we have, building this really powerful platform of AI on top of our Atlassian Cloud products. All right, so let's go ahead and jump back into our project here and kind of leave the code here for a second. So we've talked now about the two ways to create a Rovo agent, through the UI and through Forge. We've also talked about one of the two ways to interact with a Rovo agent, which is through the chat. And the other way to interact with a Rovo agent is through automation. So if I go ahead and pull up this screen here, I want to show you that example that I had the screenshot for earlier for this auto prioritize issues. Now, if you haven't used automations before, essentially the way that they work is that we start with a trigger. So this trigger is basically what's going to kick off the automation. So whenever an issue is created, I'm going to start the process of running this automation and go through step by step to each of these different steps that I have here and run this process. So when an issue is created in this project, and this is for the Legal Team 1 project that we've been looking at, I want to then use a Rovo agent. And use Rovo agent is now an available step as part of my automations in Jira and Confluence. And I basically go in and I can select a Rovo agent. And from that selection, I can then give it a prompt. And the prompt is going to be what I send that Rovo agent as if I were chatting with it to get a response. So even when we're using an automation, we almost still are interacting with this agent as if it were a chat, right? We're asking it a question, we're giving it a prompt, giving it some data to work off of, and we're expecting a response. Now, an important thing to note when we're talking about automations is that in order to operate on that data correctly, in order to actually utilize the response of the agent well, especially in this case, we have to think a little bit differently about how we create those agents. I actually want to go ahead and jump back to this screen here and pull up the other agent that I use for this, which if I can go ahead and find it here, it's this legal request prioritizer. To go ahead and view this agent. I've actually created this to prioritize the issues in that Legal Team 1 project the same way that I did in the legal assistant I was showing before. But specifically here, I have refined the way that it can respond to just a one-word response that is going to be either high, medium, or low. And the reason that I'm doing that is I need to be able to rely on that response being something that I can easily take action on. So I need to be able to easily understand, is the response that I'm getting for a high priority, a medium priority, or a low priority ticket. And from there, I can use that to actually take action on it in the rest of my automation. So it's just really important to keep in mind that when you're building automations that rely on the response from the agent, make sure you build an agent that's able to handle that adequately. So back to the automation. What you'll see is that I'm using some smart values here. So in automations with Jira and Confluence, these kind of curly bracket values are essentially going to represent values from the issue that we're talking about. So issue.summary and issue.description. These get replaced with the values of my summary and description of the ticket that was just created. And then further on, beyond this use Rovo agent where I send it that prompt, I now have a new smart value called agent response. An agent response is going to be the value of the actual text that would have been sent back to me through chat if I were to be talking with this particular agent directly through chat. So agent response now allows us to get that value of low, medium, and high. And I have a branch here. So basically for each of those values, if it's low, medium, or high, I am going to assign the priority based on that value. Let's go ahead and see this running in action. If I go back to this project and hit create, I'm going to create a, let's say a request for contract review. I'm going to say, need a signed contract for the Hernandez case, let's say. And if I were to ask it that, and give it the Hernandez name, I'm just saying need a contract. Department is legal. I'm going to leave the priority as medium, so I'm not going to touch the priority. Because this has to do with a contract, it should theoretically be a high priority. I'm going to allow Rovo to handle that for me, so I'm going to just not touch the priority. Go ahead and hit create. Once I hit create, I'm going to go ahead and open this issue up and kind of see if it set that priority correctly. So go ahead and hit view issue. Now it might take a second for it to actually take action on it. So right now it does say medium, but if I give it a second to run here, go ahead and there we go. So now I have created a automation that automatically sets my priority based off of the criteria that I gave that agent. So you saw it took a little bit there, but relatively speaking, it's actually pretty fast for an AI process to take action. And most users would never even notice that this had happened behind the scenes. It would just start to prioritize things for our team over time. And this is something that maybe we feel like the priority is kind of a subjective thing that gets set on tickets, right? Everybody has their own idea of what priority means. We want to have that be a bit more defined, a bit more consistent. So we use the Rovo agent to handle that rather than relying on users to set the priority. All right, so now we've seen both of the ways to create a Rovo agent, both of the ways to use a Rovo agent. And we've also seen an example of doing that both in Jira and in Confluence. So what I want to do from there is just jump back into our presentation and talk a little bit more about some strategies for building agents, kind of summarize a couple of things here and go from there. So the next thing to look at is just going back to this diagram, because now we've seen all the different pieces, how they fit together, what it actually looks like practically from some demos. We've seen how to create and use Rovo agents, how to use Rovo search, and how to use Rovo chat. So back in this big picture, you can see how we've connected all the different pieces of our organization together using both Rovo and Forge, as we saw in that Forge example as well, to create this unified platform, create kind of some AI transformation, AI insights, and kind of some business transformation on AI using Rovo, using Forge, using Atlassian Cloud products, and then pulling in the data from those external connections like we saw in a couple of different examples there. If we have connections available for Rovo Search and Rovo Chat, we can set those up out of the box, and we can use Forge to connect any tools that are not already available to be connected through the out-of-the-box tools. All right, so going from here is a couple of strategies to be thinking about for Rovo agent implementation. Number one is to understand the problem. I really want to call out here that we don't want to be what I'll describe as a hammer in search of a nail, right? If we view Rovo and AI as our hammer, as our solution, and we're looking for the problem to use AI to solve, we're kind of already in the wrong mindset. We want to be looking at where are the problem areas, where are those areas of friction, where are the problems that already exist that we want to solve, and is AI the right solution? Is Rovo the right solution to solve that problem? We also, from step one, want to establish a clear measure of success. So right off the bat, we're going to establish what are the ways that we can determine whether or not our Rovo implementation has been successful. Is it going to be less time spent on tickets? Is it going to be, coming to an answer more quickly on a JSM request? Is it going to be, that the HR staff gets less questions during the week about, simple responses? Whatever that measure of success is, define that before you can start playing around with the Rovo agents so that you can know if you are actually accomplishing that measure of success as you're experimenting. From there, we go to step two, and step two is going to be to experiment and kind of just explore the different Rovo agents. Usually here, you're going to be having a corporate sponsor in your business to kind of understand the tool set for Rovo agents, some of the use cases. You're going to be experimenting with your teams, building out some agents, testing them, seeing if they work. understanding if they're going to actually help reduce those pain points, but really just without being too serious about it, just testing everything and determining if that's going to be something that's valuable over time. Once you kind of find the areas that are going to be the most beneficial, you see, oh, okay, these ones seem like they're working for us. These other examples don't work for us as well. Then you go to step 3, which is to connect back with end users, actually get some real feedback from real users, and then directly compare that with your measure of success and the goals that you set in step 1. I also will point out that it's a good idea to start small. So when you're building an agent, you want it to do one thing at the beginning. So you want it to start with a very simple task. You want it to just do that one task. And over time, you'll expand that to do more and more things, be more and more powerful. But the thing that's challenging about AI and agents especially is that as you are implementing them, if you have it do 10 things all at once and you kind of build this big agent all at once from the beginning, it's hard to test each of those individual tasks one by one. It's hard to determine if you're building the agent correctly. It's hard to really test around it unless you actually test, each step one at a time, implement small, small parts of it bit by bit until you've built that full scope of the agent. Now, a little bit more about how Valiantys comes into play with Rovo agents is, we've already seen how we can kind of tailor our AI context with the tools that Atlassian provides, solving some of those bottlenecks and friction points. This is where, Valiantys and our offerings around Rovo are going to help to create that overall solution, create the, processes, create the knowledge, the understanding, where we can go through that 3-step process with you, help you find those use cases, help you understand, where we can use that in your business. Now, if you are not already on cloud, if you are still on data center and you don't quite have the cloud instance yet to actually build Rovo agents on top of, Valiantys can also help you migrate to the cloud. So cloud migrations are a big part of our business and something that we're also able to do. And we can include Rovo exploration and Rovo and AI transformation as part of your cloud migration effort as well. So just kind of throwing it out there that we're able to help with that process. I also want to go to this next step screen here and point out that we do have a Rovo Jumpstart offering. So if you're looking for a way to just get started immediately, spend some time with our teams, create some real proof of concepts with some hands-on time, kind of work together with our team to understand Rovo a bit more, to get some hands-on experience with it, and to come away with it with some real use cases and to make a strong business case for Rovo, or to discover that areas you thought it might be helpful in, there actually are better solutions for it, and we can kind of help you go through that process. This QR code also will take you to my LinkedIn page, so feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn and connect. I'd be happy to connect with you there, and reach out to my email directly or to anywhere that you can get in contact with Valiantys about our Rovo Jumpstart offering or cloud migration offerings, or really any of the other offerings that we have, so we can help you along your cloud transformation and AI transformation journeys. Now, if you do have any questions, we're going to go ahead and answer those now. I'm going to go ahead and pull up our Q&A section. There's a Q&A button in a Zoom there that you can go in and ask a question, and we have a little bit of time here where I can answer those. I see a couple of them that are already in chat that I'll go through and answer as anybody else is typing questions they might have. The question here that was from earlier on, what is the distinction between agents and automations? So automations are a process that takes place that is just step-by-step, kind of a, it runs the same way every time. Agents are built into AI. So agents are where we're taking AI context. We're using large language models to understand the context, to create contextual understanding of that particular automation. And we kind of use them together if we want to build that process a bit further. And that's where that distinction lies. Okay, so I've got a question here. So in the picture of the agents where it shows legal assistant, what safeguards are in place to stop agents giving legal or medical advice, for example? Gotcha. Yeah. So in the case of kind of giving legal or medical advice, for that particular agent, that legal assistant agent, it actually only has access to the project that I gave it access to. It only has access to the legal assistant or to the legal team 1 project, and all of the data it gives me will be from that legal team 1 project. So it would only be able to give legal or medical advice if that project contained legal or medical advice. It's not just going out to the broader internet to find random advice to give to the user. It is actually being refined down to just the information that I have given it access to from that project. All right, so do we have to license all of our users for Rovo, or can we buy only the licenses we need? We want to use it for our JSM license users, not all our JSW Confluence only users. Okay, so the way that Rovo works as of today is that you do need to license it for all the users in your cloud instance. The reason why is because of the way that Rovo scales and because of the data requirements for a tool like this. So Atlassian is using quite a bit of processing power for their in-house LLMs that they run inside of Atlassian. They're using those for all the processing that happens for this tool. And Rovo is a separate product with its own licensing because of that, because it's expensive to run that, all of that processing for AI, and it gets quite scaled pretty quickly, right? So when we look at the way that we need to determine cost for an instance, the number of users that are interacting with the data is important, but it's also important to understand that the more users there are in an instance creating data, the heavier the load on that infrastructure becomes. So even if you have a bunch of Confluence users and Jira Software users that aren't actually necessarily interacting with Rovo, they're creating data that Rovo needs to index and process. So because that data is being created by that number of users, that's where the pricing can come from for the licensing on Rovo. We might see some changes to that in the future. It'd be cool to see some more ways to kind of refine the scope so that we can have different licensing models. But as of right now, you license for all the users in your instance. All right, so are there any limitations in terms of how deep Rovo can ingest data in terms of where the data is sitting on a particular site source? Yeah, so the limitations that we have are mainly for when you don't use Forge. So when you're using just the UI, just the out-of-the-box tools, it's going to be limited to just the instance that you have. So just the instance that Rovo is installed on that you're looking at. It will go across all of the products, and it will also include all of the external connections. So all those external connections like Google Drive, Slack, or whatever other tools you want to implement with, it'll have access to those as well. If you need to go beyond that, we aren't really limited to just those things because we can use Forge to connect with those other tools. So when we talk about connecting with tools that don't have those built-in connections, we can use Forge to connect with those pieces and use kind of the code behind it to go and call APIs for different tools or grab data from internal knowledge bases, that kind of thing. So if there isn't already a connection set up for the tool that you want to integrate, we can do that with Forge. If you want to reach out to Valiantys, we can help you with that as well. We've got a developer team that is kind of skilled up on Forge and skilled up on Rovo and ready to do that. So feel free to reach out. We can help you along that. Our Rovo Jumpstart offering is also a great way to get in the door with that. We can talk about how to connect some sources that maybe you don't already have connections for in Atlassian Rovo. All right, so can it ingest hidden revealed data? So drop down, modal pop-up, expandable section, tooltip, dynamic contents behind a button or hover action. Okay, so any of the data that exists in the actual database for a Jira issue or a Confluence space or page, it will have access to. So if the data that is like hidden behind, revealed things like drop downs and tooltips and that kind of thing exists as a value inside of the database behind Jira Cloud or Atlassian Cloud, it could be any product, not just Jira, it could be Confluence as well, then it will have access to that. So the way that you interact with that on the screen normally, so if it's a dropdown or a modal, that's not really what determines how we get access to it from Rovo. It is whether or not that data is just part of the structure of the data behind the scenes that runs the issues or spaces or pages. So it should have access to all of that information. All right, so the question is, what are the available connectors API for external data sources for Rovo? Can it be pointed to a SharePoint site? So we can actually go and, we can even just find, so, Atlassian Rovo search connections, and we can see that. So manage Rovo connectors, should have a list here. So right now we have Google Drive, SharePoint, Slack, GitHub, Teams, and then we have this connect a custom website to Rovo page as well. So these are the current ones that are built in. So your question there was specifically about SharePoint. SharePoint is one of the options that we do currently have. All right, so are there any limitations in terms of how deep Rovo can ingest data? I think we already answered that one. Ingest revealed data, answered that one as well. Available connectors, answered that one. Could a JSM customer ask their Rovo agents a question without being licensed for Rovo and still get content from a combination of Confluence knowledge, JSM issues, which they are request reporter certificate of? So a JSM customer is going to be a different question than somebody who's licensed in JSM as a user. So there's another tool that exists called JSM agents, and JSM agents, virtual agents that you might see them called as well, are intended for kind of the external facing version of this. So when we're talking about with a JSM customer, then that JSM customer would be able to interact with a virtual agent that would serve some of that purpose. But you also have the potential to use Rovo even in that scenario. So let's say you have a JSM customer who makes a request. You can have a Rovo agent with an automation to get some insight and knowledge off of it and add that as a comment to the ticket. So you're not going to be able to have that JSM customer directly chat with Rovo where it's like actually that chat screen showing up unless they're licensed under the product. But you could have that customer ask a question essentially as part of the ticket. So the summary of the ticket, the description of the ticket that they're of the request that they're making, and you can have an automation that tells Rovo to ingest that information and then respond using a comment that could be seen by that customer. So there are ways that you can still use Rovo to benefit an external facing customer, but it would be through a different method, like a comment being put on a ticket based off of the response of Rovo. All right, so I've answered all the questions that I saw here. Oh, got a new one. There we go. Okay, so would the VSA be displayable as a pop-up bubble instead of opening another tab if clicked by a user? So you're wanting to be able to access some of the feature set without going to a different screen. Let's see, I don't believe there's currently a way to do that without opening another tab. But that'd be interesting to see. As far as the way the interface works, there's a certain level of customization that we have that we can build with Forge, but the way that it works from the user interface is mostly just kind of set by the feature set that exists. So we could probably make a feature request for that in the future as well. Okay, so I think that's all the questions there. Oh, there we go, got another one. Are robo search or agents capable of working across multiple languages? For example, are the data in Confluence in multiple languages? So as of right now, I'm not totally sure on that answer. I believe that should be coming either way. Right now, since a lot of the focus has been with the kind of initial feature set, it's been based around English. That's a good question. I will ask that to Atlassian because I'm curious about that as well. We've actually used Rovo and used Atlassian Intelligence to do some translations before, so it's definitely capable of handling other languages. It's not restricted to just using English. But I haven't tested with it other languages enough to know, like how consistent it is and if it works exactly the same way as it does in English versus other languages. Not totally sure what, the level of consistency is there, but I know it's capable of doing that, especially because we have used robo agents, for example, to when you create a page to create a translated version to that page. It's actually a pretty good use case for something like robo and an automation is to do some automations that automatically translate pages. So it should be able to handle that, but I haven't directly tested it enough to know for sure what the limitations of that might be. All right, so we are at the kind of final couple of minutes here of our time slot, and I think I've answered most of the questions there. If you have any other ones, feel free to ask them, but otherwise, feel free to reach out through the email that I had on the screen before, through LinkedIn. Any method to contact Valiantys works, and I appreciate your time, and hopefully you got something out of this webinar, and hopefully we see you back at Valiantys for some Rovo Jumpstart work or any other offering like cloud migrations and transformations that we do as well. All right, thank you.